Blockchain in Action section powered by Elrond continues. How else than with a fireside chat in which we are going to talk about the key challenges blockchain startups are facing today. So please allow me to introduce on stage Beniamin Mincu, Elrond Network founder and CEO, and Luka Sucic, Programs and Biz Development at Eternity Ventures. Guys, do you need mics or do you already have some? Okay.
Thank you
Okay.
very much. 1, 2. Very good. Hello, everyone.
Hello, guys.
Did you fall asleep? No?
I don't think so. So I'm Beniamin Mincu, CEO of Elrond Network, and I'm here with Luka Sucic, part of Aeternity Ventures.
Exactly.
We're going to talk a bit about the challenges that blockchain startups are facing today. So I'm curious to hear a bit about what Aeternity Venture is doing, what you're focusing on, and then we can dive into the challenges.
So Eternity is a blockchain platform trying to solve a couple of major issues that exist since the beginning of the blockchain platforms. Scalability, one, having outside influence, real world influence on the smart contracts, governance, and a lot of other things. So basically we started off from that. We raised an ICO back in 2017 when it was cool, and we started developing it really heavily, team of 135 people, 85% of developers. And then after we were very close to the mainnet launch, to the push to production, we decided it's time to structure. It's an open source project, so it's a hybrid between the old world and the new world, the startup and a project of a normal type. And we realized we need to make it sustainable on one hand, meaning that it can sustain at least 10, 20, 50, 100 developers in the next 10 years. And then it can basically scale. Other solutions will be built on top of that throughout the year. So that's why we decided to start the venture arm, basically investing in dApps, distributed applications, who will build on top of our network. So you saw one of those. Wadex is one of our investments. So basically the on-chain and cross-chain in atomic swaps will be built on Wadex, hopefully.
Okay. That sounds good. How far along are you with finding dApps that should build on your platform?
Well, it was much easier than I anticipated. Look, I'm coming from a different world. I'm coming from a startup world. I was a startup founder. I was running an incubation program, an acceleration program, a VC arm, different kinds of things. And one of the things that I realized, blockchain, I was always there somewhere around it. For me, it was something at the beginning very exciting, esoteric, new, and at a certain point it became, oh shit, a lot of scams, don't go there as an investor. And I'm trying to balance between both worlds at the same time right now. And I think I'm in the right spot because I can basically detect one or another. So I expected to go through much more, let's say, I wouldn't say junk, but let's say wrong applications, wrong things. These types is, you have a lot of teams, whatever it's hype this year or the past year, you try to stuff it in your idea. I don't know, 5, 10 years ago, it was the cloud, cloud-based something. 2 years ago, it was machine learning, AI, neural network, something. This year, it's blockchain. These things that you sprinkle a little bit of magic on top and it becomes something like this. That's easy to spot. But one of the things that we're actually trying to find is, it's such a bad word, and meaning that it's being overly used and abused, and it lost its meaning. The true disruptors, the challengers. So things that are going to challenge the way that we do things right now, and in 5, 10, 15, 20 years' time, completely change the way that things are done. Rotary phones versus,
So you mean you're looking for Elrond?
Well, yeah. We had a discussion. There is. The name of Eternity, nomen est omen. It's exemplifies something. Elrond also. To the geeks out there, it also signifies something. So what we're trying to do. A lot of. The core of Eternity is mostly ideological, because we believe that decentralization and this trustless nature is going to bring better things. Not all of them, but majority of the things are going to change for better. And we are really patient, to wait it out. We're not in it for the Lambos, moons, and all the other, usual stuff. So we were fortunate enough to fundraise in a crucial, important moment. This was, I think, March 2017. It was below the peak, just barely, and then we closed, I think, in May or June or July, just before the end of the peak. So perfect timing, and we are funded. So I heard someone saying we have a runway of 42 years. So, which is, if we don't screw up. But, so for us, it's again, a matter of the sustainability as opposed to return on investment. Return on investment, that's one of the challenges. I mean, these are one of the key challenges that startups face. If they raise money via token sale of any kind, ICO, utilities, security, doesn't matter. They will have a lot of Lambo kids. This is how I call them. A lot of investors, clinging to your Telegram chat or Twitter or Facebook or on your email, asking you when are you going to deliver 100x on their investment. Everybody wants to be a billionaire these days. Everybody. Let me ask you here: how many of you have heard this story about a friend who, had a wallet with a bunch of Bitcoins and then he lost it? Show your hands. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10. So you have 10 multi-billionaires somewhere there. Realistically, maybe one. So that's the whole point here. There is a lot of buzz around it, but not buzz. There is a lot of, what's the right word? Urban legends, that's the word. So everybody knows a guy who lost 10,000 Bitcoins. Everybody knows a guy who, had a hard drive burned somewhere.
Right.
And everybody knows a guy, you actually know a guy who earned 100x on an investment. So
Know a guy. Yeah, so I do think that it's very, very interesting to see the landscape developing. And with Elrond, we are trying to focus on something similar to what you guys are doing with Aeternity. And we think that perhaps the most important problems in the space at this point will be not only scalability, but also usability. Yeah. So this is what we are focusing on, but what I know is that it's much easier to talk about stuff, and the hell breaks loose when you're starting to implement the interesting theories you have. So I'm quite curious, what are the really good traits you're looking for when you look at founders that want to start this type of startups?
Look, the first one, let's start from a different perspective. So the first one that is kind of a red flag is if you're in it for the Lambo. If your outlook is 2 years.
But how do you discover that?
It's
Let's
easily. You need an hour, 2 of discussion, an honest discussion. Not an honest discussion, just a discussion where you poke, from different sides, and then you realize that first they usually don't know the fundamental requirements of a blockchain being a blockchain and usage. We had this discussion backstage. Right. If you're trying to implement a blockchain is something that doesn't need blockchain, you're just killing yourself because you're using a database which is slow and super expensive.
Exactly.
And you don't need it. So seeing it from that angle. The second one is this is a very fast world, extremely fast world. So it is unlike anything I've seen so far. So all the startups trying to raise ICO right now, we're focusing on December 2000, a year ago. So these things that, existed a year ago, these fundamentals are wrong, completely changed. So all of them who tried to fundraise in the last year failed miserably, with a couple of exceptions. So resilience is another one, that you can pivot or survive, your way through a nuclear, fallout. So a nuclear mushroom is in the middle of your playing field, and you say, you know what, yeah, let's go around it. That's one of the things that we kind of try to see. Try to identify, because that's the only thing that's going to survive next year.
Yeah, I do agree that perhaps most of the startups that we see today will have to pivot and adapt as one of them discovers a viable business model. But I'm curious what you see as the maybe most important challenge you guys have faced with Aeternity. On the
As a
one
project?
yeah,
Or
as a project in
Yeah.
building stuff, and then on the other hand, maybe with
I think that's one of the fundamental challenges of the market itself. I mean, the blockchain space itself is that very little people starting projects have experience of scaling something like this in the past. So you have, don't get me wrong, like crypto anarchists, hackers, people with development backgrounds trying to scale a major, huge business of a magnitude of UiPath. UiPath is 3 billion value right now. So you have companies that are have risen 5 billion US dollars and are worth consecutively around 40 with a pitch deck, no customers, and a very murky background. So what I'm trying to say is that our biggest challenge was structuring, behaving like a corporation in a world that hates corporations. Somebody mentioned it earlier in the discussion, it's like a counterculture. So you're trying to behave as, no, you need to behave as a corporation because that's the only thing that will make you survive for the next 5 years. Structure to an extent, finance to an extent, processes to an extent, you know, all of the good things about it without all the bad things. So it's kind of an oxymoronic situation. So the speed, the things change so fast that you need to change. Imagine if Google was playing in the same field, you know, as you know, some of the companies right now in the market. It would die in a matter of a month, 1 month. So with all the billions that it has, if it didn't adapt, it would be sued to oblivion or hacked to oblivion. So it's a very unforgiving world. So here you need the flexibility of the people and at the same time, you know, willingness to sacrifice your ideology at certain point to kind of, you know, survive another day.
Right.
A little bit, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was coherent.
No, I do think that what you're maybe saying is that the ability to adapt is perhaps more important in this market than
Absolutely.
in any other, especially because it's at the very inception still, after 10 years from Bitcoin's invention. But I'm curious how you're reasoning currently when you look at, let's say, a new blockchain that is trying to build things but has not figured out what its business model is, if you think in business model.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, that's the problem with all of them. There's not a single business model that actually works at this point. They're all basic, and everybody's trying to experiment. I mean, I'll give you an example. If you think about, give me one blockchain project that you think that might have hit the business model. Ethereum, for example.
Elrond?
Okay. How many customers do you have?
We'll come to that. We'll come to that.
But if you think, if you look at Ethereum, for example, right. Ethereum, everybody thinks that they have a very nice business model, but it's fundamentally flawed because of many things. Scalability is one, but more fundamental is they have ICOs, people, you know, owning their tokens, holding their tokens, at the same time removing it from the market and trying to hold it for their own projects. And then, you know, you have this fundamental flaw of a source of payment for the transaction on the hold of value, which basically kills you in the end.
Right.
Because you're not fast enough.
I do think that people had not figured out how you can scale this kind of things on the one hand, but also it's very, very hard to see how economics play out. Oh, yeah. It's easy to make some decisions, to design some things, and it's extremely hard to foresee how things will turn out after 5 years. And I do think that Ethereum is doing a very good job at experimenting and trying to discover some viable ways
adapting,
to transform this. But I do think that it's very hard to apply a business model at this point when you think of a business model as recurring revenue. Because you could make money in lots of ways. Just look at Ethereum, how they're trying to bootstrap stuff. But it's not recurring, right? This is why everything is changing, and it especially ties to what you've mentioned before. Things have changed dramatically from last year to this year, and I think they will look very, very different in 2-3 years from now.
For sure. Nobody knows. I mean, that's what makes it so much of an excitement, is these are quantum leaps that happen in this market. If you, I mean, I'm fully, dedicated to this, and I'm following the market very closely, and still I have trouble sometimes catching up to all the new, concepts, research that has been implemented in these kind of things. So I think that's, its biggest trait. So blockchain business models at this point are irrelevant because of the, not because they're irrelevant, because business models will be figured out later on. But the business model of Netscape, of the first graphical browser, was very murky. They were selling, servers, which is completely different from the, their core business. Just like here, it will pan out in the end. But this graphical interface on the internet basically spurred not one market, but millions of markets, billions of dollars of worth. So I think this is going to happen the same, that it's not about the earliness of the market, it's about, this, I don't know, paradigm shift of thinking in terms of everybody's trying to assess the teams existing in the blockchain space as if they are normal startups. You know the term, if it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. In this case, if you have, if you hear the hoofs, they're not horses, they might be zebras. So,
what would you say you're trying to look for that is very different to a normal tech startup when you're looking at a blockchain startup?
That's a tough one. I mean, again, I believe the adaptability. So it doesn't matter where someone is coming from what angle. It's this assurance that whatever happens, that this guy will, survive it. Okay. So only this. You can have a pedigree, whatever you want. You can work in KPMG, Adobe, GetCAD, Unicredit, Bitdefender, Tradeshift, but it doesn't matter for this. If you survived these kind of things, it's...
Yeah. I agree here. I think there's a very interesting reasoning experiment discussed in the blockchain space right now, and this is called the idea maze, where you basically have this whole problem framed as a maze, and then the basic assumption is that if you have a football coach and a football fan watching the same game, both of them see and receive the same input, but both of them have different outputs. They process things differently, they understand things differently, and also one can judge what measures he could take in order to win or attack or whatever. The other just feels excitement maybe and wants to do something. I do think that good founders, both in tech startups and the blockchain space, look much similar to the coach than the football fan.
Absolutely.
So they have this strong intuition that this is an unsolved problem, that it will be extremely difficult, but they also have a feel of what the good direction might be. They might stumble, they know there might be lots of obstacles, but without trial, there will not be this kind of shift.
Exactly. I mean, again, if you look at it, everybody's talking about, feedback loops, MVPs, the startup lean, la, la, la. This is taken to extreme because you're playing with the fundamentals. So with everything, you're putting everything on the roulette red because you think it's going to be, and you're required to do a lot of these bets at the same time. So you have people who thrive for this. You have people who are multi-million billionaires who, you know, for them money is of little value. You have all the Vitaliks Buterins, all the, you know, quasi-Satoshi Nakamotos who are not in it for the money. On the other hand, you have a lot of, you know, who are in it for the money, but that's not what survives.
Right.
If you know what I mean.
I also think that at some points blockchain is reasonably considered to be compared with a religion, much more than a business, because
That's true.
you have all this almost insane people, very, very determined to make something happen. And once you find, maybe you'll find a Vitalik Buterin, one in maybe a million people, but if you have enough people, you will have this kind of enormous impact and effect. And I think at the end of the day, it's easy to look at how the days pass. And I think it was Sam Altman that was saying that the days are short, the days are long, but the years are short.
Yeah.
Because you work and work and work, but when you stumble into something that is really huge and it's working,
Takes you a lot of...
yeah, you wish you had started a few years back.
Exactly.
Because if you started that day, I think it's going to be a bit too late.
Absolutely.
So are there any kind of important things you would say to startup founders that would want to try and discuss with you guys?
I mean, for us, it's really, I mean, really important to understand what is the value of the blockchain beyond the tokens, beyond all of the things. What is the like 2 or 3 or 4 maybe fundamental things that actually need these things.
Okay.
Second would be is that, you know, agnosticism, being agnostic towards everything and trying to you know, challenge every assumption that somebody has, you know, given you. That's the second one. So why is one of the universal things? Why would I need that? Why would I use this? Why would I need to fundraise? Why would I? All of these things are very, very important. But at the same time, being a very self-critical, you know, not being this messiah complex that you mentioned is very common in this world, and it's sometimes very hard. I mean, there's a very thin line between, you know, being completely insane, batshit insane, and really, really smart. So sometimes it's hard to distinguish.
What if you would say you would be able to only invest in one dApp?
Okay.
What would it be? What vertical? What direction?
Briefly, because time is up.
Yeah. Vertical, dApp, definitely finance of some sort. So anything in fintech, something. VC, disrupting VCs or insurance, something that is old and ready to die.
Cool. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.